we'll begin by taking a look at what happens in our brain when we're caught in the stimulus reaction chain. And they're very often relational, where we get triggered and we go into this chain of reactivity. And my favorite illustration comes from Dr. Dan Siegel, who's a psychiatrist. He's a friend also, and he's one of the leaders in what's called interpersonal neurobiology. And what Dan does is he says, think of the brain, and he says, and he picks up his hand like this. He says, think of the brain like this, that your wrist leading into the palm of your hand is like a spinal cord going into the skull. So this is the brain stem, okay? And then he says, this thumb is your limbic system. And this is to do with arousal and emotions and relationships. So you've got the brain stem that's really regulating your body, and it's fight, flight, freeze, okay? And then you've got the thumb that's emotions, it's the limbic system. And he says these four fingers, okay, you see it like this, is the cortex, the frontal cortex. And this is what allows us to perceive the outside world and think and reason. And the prefrontal cortex, which is the kind of bottom part of my knuckles right down here, is really the source of mindfulness, attunement, empathy, compassion. So this is the brain. And what happens when the brain is integrated, kind of holding together, is there's a flow upward of, uh-oh, danger, gotta do this, gotta do that, fight, flight, flee, freeze. And then downward there's a, it's okay, we've been here before, we know how to deal with this. And so there's fibers, literally, that come down from the prefrontal cortex that soothe and deactivate the limbic system. So there's a kind of upward flow and then a downward feedback. But what happens when we get stressed, when there's a real shooting of fear or anxiety, or it happens very regularly, is we flip our lid, okay? And we go around a lot of times kind of like this, or half open. And what that means is at those times when we're stressed and in reactivity, we're no longer getting the benefit of that insight and that perspective and that empathy that comes from the prefrontal cortex, which is the most recently evolved parts of our brain. Instead, there's a subcortical looping going on that's got a lot of, there's thoughts, but there's a lot of feelings and there's a lot of reactivity. There's a growing body of research that shows that the more we practice mindfulness meditation, the more we are strengthening and activating the prefrontal cortex, the more integration we are able to sustain. It's very interesting that it becomes a trait, that it becomes really a quality of our awareness, that we're in that remembrance. We're still getting the feedback from our mindfulness and our empathy, a sense of morality, a sense of the bigger picture.